Good afternoon, all. I'm a little hoarse. Well, I suppose that's better than being a big horse, but it's been one of those weeks where you knew this day was coming and you did everything you could to try to make things as good as possible. I mean, we've gone through about, at least 130 IU of D3, these have that of colloidal silver and a bunch of other things. It'll be gone in a couple of days, but I kind of need it gone now. But I'm just thanking God that I was able to get this far. There's so many that haven't for whatever reason. So I'm not one to complain. I'm not one to diminish, because it's funny how that actually kind of falls right into what we're talking about today. How strange it has become. The weather and everything else. I mean, the closer we get, it seems, to the beginning of the end times, the less faithful the world becomes. Strange things are happening all around us, things that we never really knew about. Not in this abundance, but with all of the news media, with nothing to do with this. Remember, does anybody remember when, I would say maybe mid-60s, 70s or so, when television actually shut off at a certain time? They would play the national anthem or something, have someone come on, and this is something I saw in Jamaica that I never saw here. They would actually have a prayer and then invite you all to come back and watch with them the next morning, and then the whole thing would shut off and you would get this weird little picture that some kind of a little, I don't even know what that was, like a test pattern or something. And if you turned on your television, that's what you saw, was that cute little pattern until the next morning when everybody came back to work. Those days are over. It's now 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 and 1/4 days a year. And it never stops, and they somehow are able to fill that time with a bunch of garbage that corrupts us all. Oh, never mind. But this is where we're at. And this is what we've seen. We're at to the point now where people, I think, watch movies and think, wow, I can live like that. On I-57 over the last month, we've had at least 4 shootings where people just drive by and just shoot into a car randomly. Of course, a couple of them were shooting from overpasses at, I guess they were playing Frogger or some updated gun form of Frogger, shooting at cars. I don't know what that's all about. Thankfully, there have only been a couple of fatalities, but I find that ridiculous, and I don't know that this would have happened 20 years ago. I'm not saying it wouldn't have. I'm just saying that I don't think so. But people are shooting at cars on the expressway. Suicide is rising in all demographics. Death is all around us, but the world bounces along as if nothing is going on. All they want you to do is buy more stuff. Buy more stuff. That's the solution to everything. Buy more stuff. Not much of a solution, if you ask me, which I suppose is probably one of the reasons no one has. But no one has asked God either. You've got animals from Wales down washing up on the Pacific shores, and the Pacific Ocean is pretty much dead. Anything that's fished out of that ocean, I wouldn't eat it. Matter of fact, I wouldn't even have it in your house. They're even finding that when they take the fish and take it somewhere and run a Geiger counter over it, the thing just goes nuts. So even if you buy it and put it in your house, you're putting live radiation in your house. Do not buy fish fished from the Pacific Ocean right now. It's just not safe. Along with that, now you've got the weather, which is completely unstable. We've got a hurricane one day, tornadoes the next, earthquakes the next, and total instability. One day it's 80 degrees, the next day it's 50, which is part of the reason I have this. I work outside in that. You try to dress for it, and even if you underdress for it, you're sweating in it, and you say, well, at least I've got enough clothes on, but now I'm cold. And it's 80 degrees outside. 40, you take a layer or two off, and all of a sudden now, it's cold again. Have to put on more. It is what it is. But along with that, people are getting sick all over the place. I don't know how many people I've run into that are coughing, hacking, and a lot worse off in this than I am. But it's warm one day, cold the next, just like I said. Yet, with all of this going on, we hear the same babble from Babel, if you will, from the scoffers, from the heathen. And now, you even hear the same thing from some learned, unquote, theologians who now deny the coming of Yeshua. I heard on last week on television, man says, well, so much is going on now until if Christ hasn't come back by now, we can safely assume that he's not coming. That's not a safe assumption, believe me. Why not? Let's drop anchor. 2 Peter, the 3rd chapter, the 3rd verse. 2 Peter, the 3rd chapter, the 3rd verse, where it says, now, first, knowing this, that there will come in the last days scoffers, walking according to their own lusts, and saying, where is the promise of his coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were from the beginning of creation. They believe this will never happen because they have not seen it, nor do they want it to happen in some cases. Some of these scoffers in the last days will also be, believe it or not, as I've seen myself, believers themselves, men who were actually trained and came through seminary and know the truth, at least based on what they learned in seminary. These men are under the cloak of the gospel. Yet, these same men, and in some cases women, make light of sin, mock salvation, especially salvation only by Yeshua Messiah. They'll say, oh, there are many ways to come to God. You even hear people now, oh, there are many ways to come to God. The Bible says there's only one. So somebody is wrong. And I'll let you figure out who. But these people do not believe he'll come because they see no changes in the world. Therefore, they fear no God. Principally because they agree with even the nonsensical changes and have conformed these changes to their lives in sin. They figure that what he never has done, they imagine that he never can do or never will do. But what does he say in verse 5? For this is hidden from them by their willing it. In other words, it's not hidden, it's in plain sight, but because you are living so busy and living so fast and doing so much of what you want to do, that you will yourself not to see it. You will yourself not to see it. That the heavens were of old and the earth out of water, and through water being held together by the word of God, through which the world that then was, being flooded by water, perished. But the present heavens and the earth being kept in store by the same word are being kept for fire until the day of judgment and the destruction of ungodly men. Now, I'd imagine if I was one of these, and if I had lived the life that they'd lived and done the things that they'd done, I guess I wouldn't want Yeshua to return either. if I knew I was not doing what he told me as a minister or even as a lay member. That's just me. But with all of the capitulation to every approved sin, you all know that there are now approved sins, right? Approved sins. Approved sins. Just let it roll around a little bit and then see if you recognize any of these. Approved sins. Gee, I woke up this morning and I felt like I could wear a dress, so I should go in the little girl's room, even though I'm a little boy. So now their laws are changing so that you can do just that. And I can guarantee you over the next few months or so, you're going to start hearing about some other little sins against our smallest people. You should always protect the smallest ones in any situation. This situation almost guarantees that you're going to see some children misused, to put it as nicely as I possibly can. We've reached the point where everything is what they call fluid. In other words, if I wake up today and want to be, what was that song, I think? He says, this morning I wake up, I think I'll be black. Tomorrow morning I'll be white. Yesterday I was a girl, today I'll be a boy. That's fluid. I posted something on Facebook, I think it was Wednesday or Thursday, where someone made that argument of fluid. I said, well, fluidity says that, okay, that we can decide which of God's laws or nature's laws we can follow anytime we want to. So why don't we try this? Let's decide we're going to defy the law of gravity. Big 6'4" guy, why don't you do us both a test here? Put on your dress, put on your heels, and go down to the Sears Tower. Go to the top floor. Jump off. And let's see if your rebellion against gravity will hold you up. Just see. Now, if that doesn't happen, you're going to hit. I've seen this. This is not pretty. When you hit the ground, you will be a small pool of something that if no one ever saw it, they wouldn't know what you were. But I guarantee you this. If they came along and did a DNA swab of that pile, they would still know whether you were a man or whether you were a woman because of the DNA left there. Now, how much did you really do by claiming your fluidity? Got about 5 responses. Most of them, believe it or not, were positive. That's rare nowadays. No attacks. Not yet. I'll go back and look tomorrow, but we'll see. But no attacks so far. But you see, this is where we're at in this world. This glory seeking that people find to say that, well, since God isn't going to do anything, I'll do whatever I want. This glory seeking is found in the leavened heart. What we want, though, and this is today's title, what we want to do is keep an unleavened heart. An unleavened heart. Now, if you go through the Bible, there are saddening examples of leavened hearts. You'll find them in the Exodus story. We'll go through one today. And in the resurrection narratives, we'll deal with the outcome of one today. It's an almost perfect example of what went on in the Exodus if you go back and look. Galatians, if you go to Galatians, the 5th chapter, the 13th verse, we'll find something very interesting there. You see, Satan has won the world over to this lawless rebellion. And everyone else, even the ones who want some faith in God, They're trapped in all of the myriad faith systems and religious systems that are set up in place of God's truth, that this falling away that's spoken of, and it would appear has already begun to happen among those who have lost their faith. This may explain why we seem to be heading toward a collapse of some kind. You ever get that feeling something's about to happen, something big? You don't know what it is. You can't put your finger on it. You can't wrap your mind around it, but you know something is, that it can't go on this way much longer. That's how I feel. But as we fall farther from the will of God in ignorance or full rebellion, I'm not sure which, and it's not my place to say, God will remove his safety from this nation. I would say it's already started to happen. He does this because he knows that only fear sends people searching for a God. If anybody really remembers, if you think back to September 11th, how we had about 90 people here for about 3 months. Then they all disappeared. You call them, oh, well, I will be back someday. It's not, don't take it personally. We just have other things to do. What other things do you have to do when your whole world is exploding around you? But you see, most don't look for the living God. They look for a God. I would go so far as to say a pet God, one that you can put on a leash and drag him around anywhere you want. And whenever you're tired of him, make him a homeless God and throw him away. But what we should be doing is looking for the living God of all people, the living God of the universe. That's the God we should look for, because he's the one that will stop all of this. A God that most people are looking for will allow some evil, some sin. Oh, well, that's a little white sin, so that one's okay. We can keep that one. But you see, those who serve a God believe that they're not bound by God's law. Paul warned us of this, as I said, in Galatians 5:13. We will get there. Got to set this up. And it has only gotten worse. Yet, as he describes first liberty, then he describes the attitudes and actions of unconverted people. This comparison appears to be a description of the Galatian church, as well as many throughout time who continue to declare themselves free of the law. Yet notice the words of Paul in Galatians, the 5th chapter, the 13th verse, where he says, "For brothers, you were called to liberty. Only do not use the liberty for an opening to the flesh, but by love serve one another. For all the law is fulfilled in one word, even in this: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. But if you bite and devour one another, take heed that you are not consumed by one another. I say then, walk in the Spirit, and you shall not fulfill the lusts of the flesh. For the flesh lusts against the Spirit, and the Spirit against the flesh." You ever notice and just feel like you've got a fight going on in your head between what you want to do and what the Bible tells you to do? This isn't unusual. This isn't strange. We all go through that to some degree. 17, for the flesh lusts against the Spirit, and the Spirit against the flesh, and these are contrary to one another, lest whatever you may will, these things you do. In other words, you may want to do one thing, but that flesh will tell you to do something completely different. 18, but if you were led by the Spirit, you are not under the law. Oh, interesting. Let's go forward. 19, now the works of the flesh are clearly revealed, which are adultery, fornication, uncleanness, Looked into that. That was interesting. It's a cute little King James word for homosexuality. Lustfulness, idolatry, sorcery, hatreds, fightings, jealousy, anger, rivalry, divisions. Another word, I don't know how many of you have it. Does anybody still have, if it's still around in any version of the Bible, party spirit? That one seems to have disappeared completely in this political age. For some reason, over the last few changes in the Bible, including the King James, for those who have been looking, that divisions used to be party spirit. But since they want everybody voting according to party, somehow it's disappeared from the Bible. And you have to go back and look at the original Greek to find it. Rivalries, divisions, heresies, envyings, murders, drunkenness, revelings, and things like these, of which I tell you before, as I always said before, that they who do such things shall not inherit the kingdom of God. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, kindness, goodness, faith, meekness, self-control. Against such things there is no law. In other words, as long as you're not doing these things, he's not saying the law is done away. What he's saying is if you're not doing anything that's against that law, the law can do nothing to you. That's all he's saying. 24. But those belonging to Christ have crucified the flesh with its passions and lusts. If we live in the Spirit, let us also walk in the Spirit. Let us not become glory-seeking, provoking one another, envying one another. I think it was Al mentioned it in a sermon a week or two ago, that most sin comes out of ego. This feeling that I'm better than you, so I should have this, and I deserve this. Do you see this glory-seeking, as I said, is found in the leavened heart. But we're trying to become an unleavened people. We're trying to unleaven our hearts. We're trying to unload those things that make us feel, I'm better than so-and-so, I should have this. I'm better than. No, we're trying to get away from that. The most perfect example I found of the complete set of sins found in Galatians 5 is found in the story of Korah and Dathan in the story of the Exodus. This one stands out to me as foolish, yet in perfect parallel with Satan's attempt to overthrow the Godhead in heaven. He was already, notice what he does. He'll already have a great position, but he wants more. He was already the most powerful angel, but he didn't want to stop there. He wanted to rule over heaven, rule over the universe. And he passed that attitude on to others. And as they came out of Egypt, Korah, Dathan, and Abiram had been chosen as Levites. A lot of people don't know what that is because we're so busy saying that the Old Testament is done away, and we don't need to study that. But the Levites were the tribe set apart by Yahweh to manage the temple. All other Israelites of adult age, which was 20 years old at the time, were automatically conscripted to the army of Israel and counted or numbered by tribe as they moved through the wilderness. Let's go to Numbers, the first chapter, the 46th verse. Numbers, the first chapter, the 46th verse, where it says, even all those who were numbered were 3,550. But the Levites, according to the tribes of their fathers, were not numbered among them, for Yahweh had spoken to Moses, saying, only you shall not number the tribe of Levi, neither take the sum of them among the sons of Israel. You see, by the express authority of God, all Levites were exempt from military service. The custody of the things devoted to the divine service was assigned to them, and it was done in such an exclusive way that no stranger, that is, no person, not even an Israelite of any other tribe, was allowed under penalty of death to approach these articles. You couldn't touch them, much less you couldn't even get within a certain proximity of them, or you would be struck down. Thus, this is how important the Levites were in their priesthood to Yahweh concerning the Israelite people. They were set apart specifically for this. A tithe was set apart for them. They got a tithe of the food, of all the offerings and everything else. So they were allowed an almost unbelievable amount of levity in terms of what they could do within the camp. What did he say? But you shall set the Levites over the tabernacle of testimony and over all its vessels and over all its things. They shall carry the tabernacle and all the vessels, and they shall serve it, and shall camp around the tabernacle. And when the tabernacle sets forth, the Levites shall take it down. In other words, you put it up, you take it down, you handle it, you know it intimately in a way that no one else will. And the stranger who comes near shall die. And the sons of Israel shall pitch their tents, each man by his own camp, and each man by his own banner. So they were divided by banners and set up in a certain way. What is not well known is the fact that the tribes traveled and camped in a fixed formation. And all the tribes had a mapped out location and position on the campground wherever the Israelites traveled and sat down. And it kind of went like this. The north, you found the tribes of Asher, Dan, and Naphtali. To the west were Benjamin, Ephraim, and Manasseh. To the east, Issachar, Judah, and Zebulun. To the south, Gad, Reuben, and Simeon. Yet there was a proximity around the temple which sat in the center. You had the north, you had the west, east, and south. And in the center you had the tabernacle. The Gershonites were on the interim between the west. The Merarites were in the interim between the north. The Kohathites were set as the interim between the south. So that there was always men at either side that would keep others from attacking the temple. This is how important it was. You were set in your place, but you put soldiers all around the temple. And the only flank that was open was the east flank, where only Moses and Aaron and their families lived. Theoretically, if anyone attacked the east flank, God would take care of them. Verse 53. But the Levites shall pitch around the tabernacle of testimony, so that there may be no wrath upon the congregation of the sons of Israel. This was the plan. If anyone attacks, we're all set. And the Levites shall keep the charge of the tabernacle of testimony. And the sons of Israel did according to all that Yahweh commanded Moses. This they did. Yet, even in all of this precision and all of these appointments to God-given positions of great authority and power, these men still wanted more. Man is never happy with what he has. I don't know what that is. I find myself having to look in the mirror and say, what more do you want? It's not, don't wake up one morning and decide, oh, wow, that's just me. I'm a terrible person. No, it's human nature. It's who we are. It's one of the things that we're fighting against in coming here and studying this book and studying the way God teaches us. He wants us to do better. But we always want more. These men, even though they had all this authority, they wanted more. Man is never happy. Man is never happy even with what he has, even when God gives it to us. We always seem to want more, especially when the ego is in full charge. And we want notoriety. We want fame. We want power. Yet what does Yahweh say about this state of mind? First of all, don't let anybody kid you. The word ego does not appear in the Bible. That's a psychological term. The Bible is beyond psychology. He made it, so why did he have to map it out? It's not necessary to map it out. He lets man do that and then shows them their flaws anytime he feels like it. It's just the way it is. God knows the mind because he created the mind. But when the ego is in full charge and we want what we want, that word is there. But the attitude is what the Bible deals with. You see, the word ego generally refers to an exaggerated sense of self-importance, which usually results in an excessive preoccupation with yourself. Yet, what does the Bible want us to do? It's part of our whole concept of the feast this year. Dying to self, which is the polar opposite of ego. And this is the biblical model for believers, but not the first choice of usurpers, not the first choice of the power crazed. I'm sure we've all seen our own examples of this attitude in the church. I know I have. And we've also seen it in the world. Anybody who worked in corporate America more than 5 minutes knows how they clamor for. I laugh about it all the time because it was some of the biggest fights I ever saw when they would get into a new building and everybody would fight over the corner office. I still haven't figured that one out yet. Everybody wants the corner office. I went in there because we were the first ones in. The computer people are always the first one in because you have to wire everything up. But I went up and walked right into, I won't say who his name was, the CEO of the company. I walked into his corner office. You can see all of downtown from that office. But other than that, what's the point? You don't control all, you survey. At least not from what I saw. So you can see, yes, it's a good view when you have people come into your office and, wow, look at my view. Oh, it's so beautiful. Oh, but it's nothing exciting to say, wow, that you're willing to cut people down to get it. But I saw it all the time. Saw it all the time. But you see, this is popular. It's a popular attitude in these hedonistic times, but it's not a new attitude. It goes all the way back to Adam and Eve. Let's understand, like I've said 1,000,000 times before. Same attitude, same thoughts, same thought process. So it doesn't change. It was around in the wilderness of sin. Notice how, once they came out of Egypt, the people openly murmured and whined about Moses and Aaron. First, it was all about the lack of fruit and meats. Let's go to Numbers, the 11th chapter, the first verse. Numbers, the 11th chapter, the first verse. And the people were evil, as those complaining in the ears of Yahweh, and Yahweh heard, and his anger was kindled, and the fire of Yahweh burned around them and devoured the outermost parts of the camp. And the people cried out to Moses, and when Moses prayed to Yahweh, the fire was put out. And he called the name of the place Taberah, because the fire of Yahweh burned among them. And the mixed multitude in their midst lusted with great lust. Not sexual lust in this case. This was just for food. And the mixed multitude, as I said, lusted with great lust. And the sons of Israel also turned and wept and said, "Who shall give us flesh to eat?" The discontented people here, obviously having come from from Egypt, dreamed of banquets, plenty of rich foods, all laid out for them in the desert. Billowing lusts of the imagination into this excitement of the appetite, no people were more guilty than the natives of Egypt, that mixed multitude who came out with them, who were used to this, not necessarily from the point of slavery, who also saw it from having to serve it to their masters. But some of these who came out, if you remember, and if you were there, some of us probably would have felt the same way. There are some people now that say that if certain people get into office, they're going to leave the country. These folk proved it. They were so tired of Pharaoh after they found out the truth of what happened that when the Israelites left, "Hey, can I go with you guys? This guy doesn't care about us. We're out of here." And they came out with him, but they brought with them their attitudes of entitlement. Wow. All they're giving you is this manna stuff? Yeah, I'm eating, I'm okay, I feel good, but what happened to all of the stuff back in Egypt? Verse 5, what did they say? "We remember the fish which we ate freely in Egypt, the cucumbers and the melons and the leeks and the onions and the garlic. But now our soul is dried away. There is nothing at all besides this manna before our eyes." Which was fascinating because somehow the manna took care of all of your nutritional needs. Right? So what's the problem? But now our soul is dried away. There's nothing at all besides this manna before our eyes. With dissatisfaction building, the people slyly began to choose alternative leaders who worked to convince them to rebel and force Moses to return to Egypt. These leaders were Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. Let's go to Numbers, the 16th chapter, first verse. Numbers, the 16th chapter, the first verse. "Now Korah, the son of Izhar, the son of Kohath, the son of Levi," making the point that these are Levites doing this, "took both Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, and On, the son of Peleth, the son of Reuben. Even they rose up before Moses with some of the sons of Israel, 250 rulers of the assembly, elect men in the congregation, men who were well known." In other words, they had positions of authority already. Notice that. "And they gathered themselves against Aaron and Moses, and said to them, 'You take too much upon you, since all the congregation are holy, even every one of them, and Yahweh is among them. Why then do you lift yourselves up above the congregation of Yahweh?'" Which was a lie in itself because they didn't do it. God gave it to them. So they're not rebelling against Moses and Aaron. When you really break it down, they were rebelling against Yahweh. Verse 4, "And Moses heard and fell on his face. And he spoke to Korah and to all his company, saying, 'Even tomorrow Yahweh will show who are his and who is holy, and will cause him to come near to him, even him who he has chosen. He will cause to come near to him. Do this. Do this. Take fire pans, Korah and all his company, and put fire in them, and incense, and put incense in them before Yahweh tomorrow. And it shall be the man who Yahweh chooses. He shall be holy. You take too much upon you, sons of Levi. And Moses said to Korah, hear now, you sons of Levi. Is it only a small thing to you that the God of Israel has separated you from the congregation of Israel to bring you near himself, to do the service of the tabernacle of Yahweh, and to stand before the congregation and to minister to them? You were leaders already, spiritual leaders, but no, you wanted physical leadership. Verse 10, and he has, and to stand before the congregation to minister to them, and he has brought you near, and all your brothers, the sons of Levi, with you. And do you seek the priesthood also? For this cause you and all your company are gathered against, not me, Yahweh. And what is Aaron, that you murmur against him? And Moses sent to call Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, and they said, we will not come up. Is it a small thing that you have brought us up out of a land that flows with milk and honey to kill us in the wilderness? But must you also seize dominion over us? He just had leadership, not necessarily dominion. They're playing this thing to the hilt at all times. Verse 14, besides, you have not brought us into a land that flows with milk and honey, nor given us inheritance in fields and vineyards. Will you put out the eyes of these men? Where did anybody say that? We will not come up. And Moses was very angry and said to Yahweh, do not respect their offering. I have not taken one ass from them, neither have I hurt one of them. And Moses said to Korah, stand before Yahweh, you and all your company, and you and they and Aaron, tomorrow. High noon, I guess you could say. Israel style. Then tomorrow came, and Yahweh decided that he'd had enough of these rebels. A lesson had to be taught against rebellion. Let's go down to verse 19. And Korah gathered all the congregation against them to the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. And the glory of Yahweh appeared to all in the congregation. Right about that point, I think I would have said, I'm sorry. I made a mistake. Maybe we can work something out. Can we work something out? How did Rodney King, can't we all just get along? Verse 20, and Yahweh spoke to Moses and to Aaron, saying, separate yourselves from among this congregation so that I may devour them in a moment. And they fell upon their faces, Moses and Aaron did, and said, O God, the God of the spirits of all flesh, shall one man sin, and will you be angry with all the congregation? Even now, here Aaron and Moses still trying to beg some quarter. God, please don't. They didn't mean it. They're sorry. They didn't say it. He did. 23. And Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the congregation, saying, get away from the tents of Korah and Dathan and Abiram. how did they say? Time for words is past. Time for words is past. Words are, there are few things more meaningless than words at the point of no return. And that's where they were, at the point of no return. Verse 25, and Moses rose up and went to Dathan and Abiram, and the elders of Israel followed him. And he spoke to the congregation, saying, I pray you, get away from the tents of these wicked men, and touch nothing of theirs, lest you be destroyed in all their sins. So they got away from the tents of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram on every side. And Dathan and Abiram came out and stood in the door of their tents. Oh my goodness. How arrogant. You've been declared null and void. And instead of hiding or kneeling or repenting, you stand right in front of everybody. As if, yeah, I did it. Yeah, I'm there. That's right. Yeah, I'm bad. All of that. Just put your movie non sequitur in there. It all fits. It all works. Just have this vision of, I think it was, I forget which prior movie that was with him, and where they were walking down the prison. Yeah, I'm bad. I'm bad. You in prison, man. How bad are you? Okay. You're locked up. How bad can you be? Just like you're about to be incinerated. And you just stand out in front of the gate like, yeah, that's mine. Yeah. And Moses said, by this you shall know that Yahweh has sent me and do all these works, and that not from my own heart. If these men die the common death of all men, or if they are visited according to the examination of all men, Yahweh has not sent me. But if Yahweh makes a new thing, and the earth opens her mouth and swallows them up with all that they have, and they go down live into the pit, then you shall understand that these men have provoked Yahweh. And it happened as he had made an end of speaking all these words. In other words, as soon as he ended the sentence with the period, God added his own little punctuation, if you will. 31. And it happened as he had made an end of the speaking of all these words, the ground under them split apart, and the earth opened in her mouth and swallowed them up, and their households, and all the men who were from Korah, and all their goods. They and all that they had went down alive into Sheol, or into the grave, and into the earth. And the earth closed up around them, and they perished from among the congregation. And all Israel around them fled at their cry. For they said, lest the earth swallow us up. Because some of them knew they were right there with them. They just didn't have the courage to stand behind them. They were feeling the same things, and they were murmuring in their tents as well. But once you hit the point of no return, they were smart enough to turn back. 35. And there came out a fire from Yahweh and burned up the 250 men who offered incense. And Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, speak to Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest, that he take up the fire pans out of the burning and scatter the fire yonder. For they are holy. The fire pans of these sinners against their own souls, let them make them into broad plates, a covering for the altar, for they offered them before Yahweh. Therefore they are made holy, and they shall be a sign to the sons of Israel. Now, what does that mean to us? These bronze censers that were used by the 240 rebel priests of Korah were made and hammered into broad plates or bronze plates to be a memorial. The altar of burnt offerings being made of wood and covered with brass. This additional covering of broad bronze plates over the top of them not only rendered it doubly secure against the fires that were set there for sacrifice, but this also served as a warning beacon to deter all others from future invasive rebellions against the priesthood. Every time you came in and looked up and saw them offering sacrifices, they saw those bronze. Hey, aren't those the plates that those guys? Yeah, that's them. Wow, they're still here? Yeah, they're still here. And they're using them? Yeah, but they're just using them to protect us, which was the role that God had when he stopped them and buried them in the ground. The exact same thing. And now they have that same role against the altar from now on. Amazing, the insight and foresight that God has. Amazing. Amazing. The leaven and sin of Korah and his company would be memorialized on the altar forever. And the people will have a reminder of the consequences of leavened, ego-driven thinking. The roots of Korah and Dathan's hatred of Moses were based on not only his position of authority. You see, this was Yahweh's choice. But these men's root of bitterness may have been, let's see if we've recognized this before, might have been Moses' choice of wives. Not as many teachers, because you see, a lot of people don't even understand where Moses' wife came from. She came from Cush. But because it wasn't so much that she was from Cush, but she was not an Israelite. Some people teach that it was because she was black. Heck, you want to get down with it, they all were on some level. So we don't even want to go there. It's not even necessary. It's not worth it to go there. It was more about culture than that. But they looked up, wow, they bring these Israelites in here. She's not an Israelite. She's not one of us. Who knows what else? She'll get him to do other things. We can't do that. This kind of bigotry continues to this day and has nearly destroyed, and this plague has not yet subsided. The emergence of this attitude again over the last 8 or 9 years may yet destroy America, unless she repents of it. A root of bitterness gave Satan his greatest ally in his errant work to destroy our Messiah also. It wasn't just Korah and Dathan and Abiram. If you move forward, let's look into something. You don't get a lot of information about this, and it's hard to dig and find it, but I wonder, what was it that set Judas off? Let's go to John, the 12th chapter, the 1st verse. John, the 12th chapter, the 1st verse, where it says, "Then 6 days before the Passover, Yeshua came to Bethany, where Lazarus was, whom had died, whom he raised from the dead." That's it as an aside. That would have been a whole sermon for most folks, that he raised a man from the dead. But let's move forward. Verse 2. "Then they made a supper for him there, and Martha served. But Lazarus was one of those reclining with him. Then Mary took a pound of ointment of pure spikenard, very costly, and anointed the feet of Yeshua and wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the odor of the ointment. Then said one of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, who was to betray him, why was this ointment not sold for 300 denarii and given to the poor? He said this, and this is John saying this because he had a little bit of inside information that maybe the other disciples didn't have. He said this, not that he cared for the poor, but because he was a thief and held the money bag and carried the things put in it. For Yeshua said, leave her alone. She has kept this for the day of my burial. For you have the poor with you always, but you do not always have me. This was the starting point and supreme example of a man who was chosen and anointed by Yeshua, but allowed his one weakness and greed to so consume him that he was actually indwelt by Satan himself, the supreme author of all rebellion. We often overlook the circumstances when we deal with this incident during the Passover, but maybe we need to take a look at it because there's some lessons here that we can all learn. There are lessons here that we have to consider. Judas had to have been carrying this jealousy of Yeshua for quite some time, possibly the entire 3.5 years that he'd been with him up to that point, and had been traveling with the 12 disciples. He'd probably seen things happen that he had never seen, even a street man. You know, street people, there's a tendency to want to. Have you ever run upon people that have been, when I say street, I don't necessarily mean homeless people. I'm talking about people that are, maybe they've rubbed up with gangs or done some things that make them think they're a little tougher than you are. You're never going to get the respect of those folks because they're going to always think of you as, And I almost feel like that was going on with Judas also, because he was a street guy. He was the guy that always knew what was going on. He had his ear to the ground. He knew what was going on. He also knew that the Pharisees had it in for Yeshua. And he was figuring out, well, see, what can I do to get on the inside on this one? And he finally figured that one out too, but we'll get there. He'd probably, as I said, seen things that he'd never seen, done things that he'd never done. There are no scriptural accounts of Judas performing any miracles, but it is likely that all 12 had this power at that time. That kind of power, if you're weak, can leaven your ego if you're not careful. Note that there were incidents where each disciple argued among themselves as to who was the greatest. And they had to be chastised by Yeshua. It makes sense that Judas may have felt that I'm better than all of them. I should be the chief disciple. After all, I'm carrying the money bag. And he may have had plans by which the disciples could have profited handily from their positions and ability to perform miracles, kind of like somebody else. Never realizing that these thoughts alone would have never been allowed by the Godhead had he acted on them. But it never stopped his thoughts of getting Yeshua out of the way. For whatever reason, and there are some things that if you study through, kind of flow out at you that might have caused it, but these roots come at you and they spring up, and all of a sudden you think, wow, I got to do this. Anger and resentment's built up, and these things can cause people to do things that defy common sense and destroy things that they love and destroy and hurt people that they truly respect because of these things that happen sometimes without any, you don't even understand why it happened. But you get angry and you can't get past it. These roots can spring up whenever someone else appears to be getting a better deal in life than you have. You get down on yourself, but rather than look internally and release your ego and try to deal more humbly with life, you make the mistake many make of comparing yourself with others and understanding that God has a plan for each one of us that may not be the one that you want, but when you see it in its fullness, it may be better than what you had for yourself. But Judas knew that Yeshua could read his thoughts. At least one would think that he did. He's proven it so many times before, even when he initially told them of the symbolism of his flesh and blood. Notice what he said at the end. Let's go to John the 6th chapter, the 53rd verse. Just keep saying it. We can finish this. We can do it. We can do it. John the 6th chapter, the 53rd verse, where it says, "Then Yeshua said to them, Truly, truly, I say to you, unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you do not have life in yourselves. Whoever partakes of my flesh and drinks my blood has eternal life." They didn't realize at the time what he was talking about. "And I will raise him up at the last day. For my flesh is food indeed, and my blood is drink indeed. He who partakes of my flesh and drinks my blood dwells in me, and I in him. And as the living Father has sent me, and I live through the Father, so he who partakes of me, even he shall live by me. And this is the bread which came down from heaven, not as your fathers ate the manna and died. He who partakes of this bread shall live forever." He said these things in the synagogue as he taught in Capernaum. Then when they heard, many of his disciples said, "This is a hard saying. Who can hear it?" They never got a chance. As a matter of fact, at the time, there were over 120 disciples. If you go back and read it, you'll find that after he said this, quite a few of them walked away. So, this dude's talking about cannibalism. I'm out of here. I can't do that. 61. But knowing in himself that his disciples murmured about it, Yeshua said to them, "Does this offend you? Then what if you should see the Son of Man going up where he was before? It is the Spirit that makes alive. The flesh profits nothing. The words that I speak to you are spirit and are life. But there are some among you who do not believe." For Yeshua knew from the beginning who they were, who did not believe, and who is the one betraying him. And he said, "Because of this, I said to you that no one can come to me unless it was given to him from my Father." But he knew at a point that something else was given to Judas. So he knew who Judas was. He knew what Judas was going to do. Judas may have at some point been offered salvation, but it was never given because he never mentally, completely accepted the plan. Judas, as I said, was a worldly man. He was a street man, and he seemed to be more given to knowing what was going on politically than what was going on with the plan of God. In some Christian historical texts, Judas was believed that he came into it not through the disciples, but he was originally a follower of John the Baptist before he became one of the 12 disciples of Christ. Judas As a former disciple of John, other writings claim we don't know how true this is, although from a psychological point, it does make sense. That Judas came to resent Yeshua for failing to save John. Further proof of Judas's outsider standing in this, not realizing that there was no schism between cousins, Yeshua Messiah and John the Baptist. There was no schism there. Even John said at some point, in order that he must increase, I must decrease. So there was no schism there, except maybe in the mind of Judas Iscariot, who couldn't let it go. Yet he felt as many do when they see their own roots of bitterness have taken them further than they should have gone in the wrong direction. Matthew, the 27th chapter, the first verse. We won't get to 15 today. Matthew, the 27th chapter, the first verse. And it became early morning, and all the chief priests and elders of the people took counsel against Yeshua to put him to death. And when they had bound him, they led him away and delivered him to Pontius Pilate, the governor. Then he who had betrayed him, Judas, seeing that he was condemned, notice this. Now, how many times does it happen in your life when you step out too far and do something, and just before you finally get spanked for it, you realize, oh man, I messed that up. I blew that. Verse 3. Then he who had betrayed him, seeing that he was condemned, sorrowing, Judas returned the 30 pieces of silver again to the chief priests and elders, saying, I have sinned, betraying innocent blood. Not to them, because they had their own axe to grind in that thing. Even if he had said, give me my money back, I don't want to do this, they weren't going to do it, because at this point, they were getting what they wanted also. Their root of bitterness, which was just as bad for the Jewish people as it was for them, as it was for anybody who listens to them even to this day. Nothing has changed. He was condemned, sorrowing. Judas returned the 30 pieces of silver again to the chief priests and elders, saying, I have sinned, betraying innocent blood. And they said, what's that got to do with us? You see to that. In other words, that's your problem. You deal with it within your own mind. We're getting what we want. We're not hearing anything you got to say. And he threw the pieces of silver down in the temple and departed. And he went out and hanged himself. All from a root of bitterness. That's one of the reasons every year when we go into the Passover season, we always say, if you've got any problems or if you have anything against any other brother, go to them. Get that stuff straightened out. Do as much as you can to get that worked out between you. Because these are the things that can happen. These are the things that can go horribly wrong in these situations. These scriptures are warnings. They're guides for our lives. They teach us that we are to live according to the will of God. We're allowed to be angry, but we must learn to express it openly to the one you're angry with, not the friends, not the others. You don't get that opportunity to tell everybody, I often think about a minister who was out and did visits, and sometimes when you're not able, 9 times out of 10, if you're going to maybe go out and visit with a woman, you should always take someone with you. But he didn't do that. He went to a young widow, and she was talking about some things that happened, and in the course of leaving the counseling session, while they were on the front porch, they hugged for a second. Now, of course, a young man from the community was walking by and saw it, himself an adulterer, went back and whispered to everybody, oh yeah, he's Pastor so-and-so is having an affair with widow so-and-so. Well, that built and built and built until finally the pastor decided, I've got to talk to this guy. We got to get this thing worked out. They called him in, and he explained it all. Called the woman in. She explained to him, there's nothing going on here. Of course, by now it had already gone on. The man confessed and says, hey, listen, I told a bunch of people, and I was wrong, and I'm sorry. And he says, okay. As an object lesson, he went back into the office in the back of his office, where he had a little bed there. He took a pillow. He says, okay, here's what I want you to do. This will make it right. Take the pillow and go up on the hill. Tear it open and scatter the feathers everywhere you can go with them. Just throw them on there. He went out there, wow, I'll do this. This is easy. He went out there, tore the pillow open, feathers flew everywhere. He came back. Okay, that's done. He says, okay, that was the easy part. Now here's what I want you to do. This will make it right with me. This will make it right with God. This will make it right with everybody else. He says, well, what do you want me to do? He says, now go out there and grab every one of those feathers and bring them back. Think before we do things, people. Think before we do things. We have to get to that point where we realize that it can all be lost because your mind is torn somewhere between faith and hope, somewhere between heart and mind, somewhere between love and pride. There are few things more meaningless than words at the point of no return.